For decades, the Mafia operated in the shadows, controlling industries no one suspected, like garbage collection. It was a billion-dollar empire built on intimidation, corruption, and bloodshed. But when two men dared to challenge their iron grip, they unknowingly set off a chain of events that would lead to one of the biggest crackdowns in organized crime history. This is the story of how the FBI shattered the New York Mafia's control over Long Island's garbage industry at a deadly cost. This is the story of a family's battle against the Mafia, a fight to earn an honest living in a world where even that wasn't allowed. It's a tale of the unchecked power and arrogance of a hidden criminal empire, one that was considered untouchable at the time. The idea of bringing down a mob boss seemed impossible, but everything changed when two courageous businessmen convinced the police to listen in on the Mafia's darkest secrets. "We kill anyone who gets too close," the mobsters boasted. But how do you deny your own voice, captured on tape? This is the story of how the Mafia's grip was finally broken and the price paid by those who dared to challenge it. Long Island, just outside New York City, a place of neatly trimmed lawns, beautiful suburban homes, and the American dream of prosperity. But beneath that dream lurked a nightmare. From an early age, Kathy knew something wasn't right. Her mother, always cautious, would personally drive her to school and piano lessons. One day, she revealed the reason. "I need to keep an eye on you. You need to be aware of your surroundings, even at the bus stop. Your father's business is receiving threats." Kathy's father, Jerry, was the son of Czech immigrants. In the 1950s, he started a small garbage collection company. Today, garbage trucks on Long Island operate under legitimate businesses. But in Jerry's time, things were different. The industry had been under Mafia control for decades. Price fixing was rampant, and the mob dictated every aspect of the business. To survive, Jerry had no choice but to join the mob-run Garbage Association. There was an unspoken rule: never compete for business outside your assigned territory. But unlike many other Long Island garbage collectors, Jerry wasn't Italian. Despite playing by their rules and paying his dues, he found himself being pushed out. By 1977, exhausted from the constant struggle, Jerry handed the business over to his son Robert and son-in-law Donald, Kathy's husband. Robert and Donald were smart, ambitious, and determined to run an honest business. Robert, who had studied business, refused to play by the Mafia's rules. "My brother just wanted a fair chance to earn a living," Kathy recalled. "He believed that if he calculated his bids correctly and won, the job should be his." He despised the corruption and the dirty politics of the industry. But challenging the Mafia was a dangerous move. By the 1970s, the Mafia was at the height of its power in New York. 5 crime families controlled major industries: construction, the waterfront, the garment district, while also profiting from traditional illegal activities. On Long Island, the garbage industry was run by the Lucchese family, originally established in the 1930s and led by an old-school mob boss named Tony Ducks Corallo. Corallo was feared and respected. A master of labor racketeering, he controlled entire industries with ruthless efficiency. The Mafia operated with impunity, and when the Quebeca family challenged their control of the garbage industry, the Lucchese family took it as a direct threat. Robert and Donald were labeled the Mafia sent enforcers to intimidate them, slapping Robert's glasses off his face at bid meetings, making death threats, sabotaging their trucks by pouring sugar into gas tanks. Once, they even firebombed Donald's truck just after he stepped out of it. Finally, in the early 1980s, Robert turned to law enforcement. A desperate gamble, Robert reached out to an investigator, explaining the threats and control the Mafia held over the industry. His claims caught the attention of Ron Goldstock, head of New York State's Organized Crime Task Force. Goldstock had inherited a demoralized unit. When I walked into the office on my first day, agents had their feet up on their desks, reading newspapers. There were no active investigations, and some indictments had to be dropped due to poor handling. But that also meant an opportunity to rebuild from the ground up. Robert Quecchia's willingness to cooperate was a breakthrough. He was a rebel, Goldstock recalled. He wanted justice, and he was willing to help. Robert agreed to wear a wire, secretly recording meetings with other garbage collectors. His recordings confirmed the Mafia's control over the industry, leading investigators to a key figure, Sal Avellino. The key to bringing down the mob, Sal Avellino, was a high-ranking member of the Lucchese family. He oversaw the garbage industry and was also the personal driver for Tony Duck's Corallo. Every morning, Avellino would pick up Corallo in his Jaguar and drive him to business meetings. Investigators were certain that their car rides involved more than just small talk. The task force devised a plan. They acquired an identical Jaguar and practiced installing a listening device under the dashboard as quickly as possible. Their opportunity came in March 1983, when Avellino attended a Garbage Association dinner and left his car outside. Torrential rain kept security away, and within minutes, agents had placed the bug. Days later, the first recordings came through. Crystal clear. On tape, Corallo and Avellino discussed Mafia business openly, unaware they were being recorded. "If someone crosses us, we kill them. That's how it is," Corallo stated matter-of-factly. The tapes captured top Mafia bosses discussing their operations, including the infamous Fat Tony Salerno, head of the Genovese crime family. Corallo even reflected on whether they should make their sons induct them into the Mafia. "If this life is good enough for me, why wouldn't I want my son in it?" Avellino mused. The recordings also revealed Corallo's disdain for the drug trade, fearing it would expose the Mafia to law enforcement. "You can't be in the drug business without going out on the street. You gotta sell it, and that makes you vulnerable. We should kill anyone who gets involved in drugs." The beginning of the end. For the first time, law enforcement had direct, irrefutable evidence of Mafia activities at the highest levels. The recordings provided an unprecedented look inside the inner workings of organized crime. Meanwhile, change was also happening within the FBI. For years, the Bureau had been ineffective against the Mafia. J. Edgar Hoover had long denied the Mafia even existed, preferring to focus on more straightforward crimes. But a new generation of agents, many of them military veterans, were ready to take the fight to organize crime. And with the tapes from Corallo's Jaguar, they had exactly what they needed to bring the Mafia down. The DMZ was essentially a battleground, constantly bombarded with artillery and rockets from North Vietnam. The inability to respond effectively or deploy resources to neutralize the threat created immense frustration. Many Vietnam veterans ended up working in the New York office and other major field offices, determined to prevent history from repeating itself. With organized crime emerging as a priority for the New York FBI, the Bureau restructured its operations to mirror the Mafia's five-family structure. Squads were organized according to each family, with a clear directive: uncover what was unknown. The hierarchy, key players, criminal activities, industry involvement, and union control. The strategy shifted away from targeting foot soldiers, focusing instead on the bosses. Similar to Ron Goldstock's task force in Long Island, the FBI recognized its most powerful tools were surveillance bugs and wiretaps. Properly placed, these devices provided unparalleled insight into criminal enterprises, revealing key actors and the full extent of their operations. Leading the technical squad was an honor requiring expertise in locks, alarms, communications, and infiltration, posing as delivery drivers, florists, and other service workers to gain access. By the end of 1983, the FBI had successfully wiretapped conversations of most New York Mafia leaders. Treating organized crime like a corporate entity, investigators gained an unprecedented understanding of Mafia culture. In one wiretap, an enraged mobster scolded an underling for missing a meeting, issuing a violent threat. One of the FBI's top targets was Fat Tony Salerno, boss of the Genovese family. A bug placed in his East Harlem social club provided critical intelligence, second only to the infamous Jaguar bug, Agents were stunned to hear Salerno dictating leadership decisions for the Teamsters Union, which represented nearly 2 million American workers. Reading transcripts of these discussions was shocking. These criminals were controlling key appointments in a national labor organization, influencing industries like trucking and waste management. The investigation revealed that the five families were not just competing, but actively working together, sharing criminal enterprises. On Long Island, Goldstock's task force noted similar patterns in the garbage industry. While the Lucchese family controlled the Employers Association, the Gambino family dominated the Workers' Union. This cooperation ensured absolute control, eliminating competition by intimidating those who attempted to offer better service or lower prices. A groundbreaking revelation emerged when wiretaps captured discussions about the Commission, the Mafia's governing body, established in 1931 by Charles Lucky Luciano. Modeled after ancient Rome, the Commission acted as a board of directors, resolving disputes, approving new members, and preventing violent internal conflicts. Law enforcement soon realized they had a unique opportunity. Instead of targeting individuals or families, they could take down the entire New York Mafia by prosecuting the Commission itself. This required unprecedented cooperation between agencies, merging the FBI's and the Organized Crime Task Force's investigations. Prosecutors turned to the relatively new Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, which made mere membership in the Mafia a criminal offense. Unlike previous law enforcement efforts that only eliminated weak players, RICO allowed prosecutors to target the bosses, even if they hadn't directly committed a crime. To build the strongest case, investigators needed charges that directly implicated Commission members. One was the Mafia's iron grip on New York's concrete industry, which artificially inflated prices. Cement that cost $16 per yard in New Jersey was $42 per yard in New York due to Mafia control. For a second charge, they revisited the 1979 assassination of Carmine Galante, former boss of the Bonanno family. Galante had overstepped boundaries by engaging in drug trafficking, something the Commission opposed, not for moral reasons, but because of the law enforcement scrutiny it attracted. His murder at Joe and Mary's restaurant, carried out by masked gunmen, was believed to have been sanctioned by the Commission. Surveillance footage later showed a hitman being congratulated by a boss from another family, reinforcing the theory of a coordinated execution. By 1983, investigators had gathered extensive evidence. On May 15, they successfully photographed Mafia leaders attending a Commission meeting on Staten Island. Meanwhile, in Long Island, Tony Corallo and Sal Avellino continued to dictate Mafia operations, emphasizing the power they held over unions and businesses. Surveillance recordings captured them openly discussing their dominance, boasting about controlling both the workforce and their employers. The FBI and the Organized Crime Task Force had assembled a historic case, one that would ultimately lead to the most significant takedown of the American Mafia. Time was running out not only for Tony Corallo and Sal Avellino, but for the entire leadership of the New York Mafia. On February 25, 1985, law enforcement carried out what was described as the most significant crackdown on organized crime leadership in nearly 3 decades. 5 reputed Mafia bosses were arrested and indicted in New York, all accused of leading the city's 5 most powerful crime families and forming the so-called Commission that governed organized crime. "This is a great day for law enforcement," an official declared, "but for the Mafia, it's probably the worst." The indictment charged more high-ranking Mafia figures than ever before, resulting in the arrest of 9 of New York's most powerful mobsters. Among them were Big Paul Castellano, head of the Gambino family, Anthony Fat Tony Salerno, head of the Genovese family, Carmine the Snake Persico, leader of the Colombo family, and Tony Dux Corallo, boss of the Lucchese family. The arrests shook the foundation of the Mafia, and it wasn't long before top mobsters turned against one another. On December 16, 1985, Paul Castellano, then on bail while awaiting trial, arrived at a Manhattan steakhouse with a single bodyguard. A rival within the Gambino family, sensing weakness, ordered his assassination to seize control. For prosecutors in the commission trial, Castellano's murder simply meant one less defendant in court. By the time the remaining 8 mobsters stood trial 9 months later, they faced an extensive list of charges, including extortion, labor racketeering, and murder. A crucial piece of evidence was the secretly recorded conversations from a wiretap placed in Carrallo's Jaguar. These tapes provided undeniable proof of the Mafia's structure, operations, and criminal dealing. Carrallo's lawyer knew the case was dire. It's one thing to counter a witness's testimony, he admitted, but how do you argue against your own voice on tape? The trial began in September 1986, and the defense made a surprising move. They openly acknowledged the existence of the commission. Denying it would have been futile, as the tapes provided irrefutable evidence. However, one defense attorney presented a unique argument, insisting that while the Mafia existed, that alone was not a crime. Despite their denials of involvement in the Galante murder and claims that the concrete racket was voluntary, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Testimony from Mafia informants, surveillance footage, and countless hours of incriminating recorded conversations. Carrallo, aware of his fate, remained composed. He seemed to accept his punishment, acknowledging the tapes had sealed his destiny. "Whatever happens, happens," he told his lawyer, "just do your best." The trial lasted 10 weeks, and on November 19, 1986, the verdicts were delivered. Guilty. "We went through the first set of charges. Everyone was convicted of something," a prosecutor recalled. "Then we realized we had won everything." One defendant reportedly turned to his lawyer and asked, "Does this ever stop?" The government had successfully dismantled the Mafia's leadership, referring to Carrallo, Persico, and Salerno as the Board of Directors of Organized Crime. The jury found them guilty of running a racketeering and extortion enterprise. The judge, taking full advantage of the RICO Act's severe sentencing guidelines, handed each of them 100-year prison sentences. The message was clear. Becoming a Mafia boss now carried a life sentence. For decades, the Mafia had embedded itself into American society, infiltrating legitimate businesses and fostering an aura of power and mystique. But after the commission trial, things would never be the same. It marked a turning point in organized crime history, proving that no one, not even the bosses, was untouchable. The once powerful organization was dismantled, its secrets exposed, and its influence diminished. More than anything, the trial shattered the illusion of the Mafia as a sophisticated criminal empire. Surveillance tapes revealed a group of men who were anything but criminal masterminds. Often disorganized, barely articulate, and far less strategic than the world had imagined. If anything makes organized crime organized, it's communication, an expert noted. And when you demonstrate that communication is dangerous, you cripple the Mafia's ability to function. However, one major omission from the charges stood out: the Long Island garbage industry. Prosecutors deemed it too complex to include in the trial, so Sal Avellino and his associates were tried separately. This decision led to a more lenient sentence. Avellino was given community service, which he was later allowed to outsource to someone else. The ruling enraged Robert Quebec, a key informant. His identity had been exposed despite promises of protection. "For years, I put myself on the line for law enforcement," he fumed, "and now my name is out there while they're letting the Mafia off easy." Though the Mafia retained control of Long Island's garbage racket, the Quebec family refused to back down. Robert and his brother Donald increased their cooperation with authorities, despite ongoing threats. Their persistence proved fatal. On August 9, 1889, Robert received a series of ominous phone calls, the last one a direct death threat. He and Donald reported it to the police, but Donald remained unconcerned. "We've made our calls," he assured his wife. "We're fine." The next morning, as the brothers arrived at their office, gunmen ambushed them. Robert was shot 3 times but managed to call for an ambulance. He died later that day. Donald was killed instantly. Their family was devastated. "I was told there was an incident involving my husband and brother," Donald's widow, Kathy, recalled, but I already knew who was behind it. With Robert and Donald gone, the Mafia moved in like vultures, seizing what was left of the Quebec family business. In the aftermath, the Quebec family successfully sued the Organized Crime Task Force for failing to protect them. Law enforcement finally launched a full-scale offensive against the Mafia's hold on Long Island. In 1993, Anthony Gaspipe Casso Corallo's successor as Lucchese boss was arrested. Seeking a reduced sentence, he confessed to the Quebec murders. The guy was an informant, Casso admitted, and there's only one way to deal with informants. You kill them. In 1994, Sal Avellino was sentenced to 10 years for his role in the murders. Today, Long Island's garbage industry is free of Mafia influence. More broadly, the Mafia itself is only a shadow of what it once was. The commission trial paved the way for a series of RICO-based prosecutions that systematically dismantled the organization. They're like a street gang now, one investigator remarked. They've been reduced to that. Their response to everything is just kill anyone who comes near us. Beyond the convictions, the trial destroyed the myth of the Mafia's invincibility. Tapes revealed that these men were not criminal masterminds, but unsophisticated and impulsive. Their conversations exposed them as anything but strategic geniuses. For the Quebec family, however, justice came too late. What the Mafia did to me, Kathy said, was tear apart my life. They're not powerful men. They're not glamorous. They're monsters. The fall of the Mafia's garbage empire proved that even the most powerful criminal organizations aren't invincible. But for those who stood against them, the price was steep. What do you think? Was justice truly served? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more chilling true crime stories only on Mystery Minds.